Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we are discussing the rise of the Ork gods Gork and Mork. General spoiler warning to begin, as we will be discussing events from across the Warhammer 40k lore, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Okay, now a couple of weeks ago we discussed how maybe we could see a possible war of the gods. How maybe other races' deities could arise and enter the conflict within the warp, with the brewing war between the Chaos Gods and the Emperor. And well, if not could, at least speculate on how awesome it would be. And well, today I wanted to focus on Gork and Mork. Now we know Gork and Mork manifest within the warp in exactly the same way as the other race's gods, becoming a reflection or focal point of all the race's beliefs and emotions. So it's no surprise to find that Gork and Mork embody everything you'd expect from the gods of the greenskin race. A non-stop storm of violence and war. One brutal and cunning, the other cunningly brutal. And I've really been thinking about this over the past few days, because as much as the grimdark setting has only ever been war, ever since the fall of Cadia and the explosion of the Great Rift, it's truly been magnified tenfold. And as the outpouring of prayer and faith in this time of darkness has thrust the Emperor's power levels through the roof, how can the same not be so for Gork and Mork? The Orks are now living their dream. Nothing but endless tides of war everywhere they look. Chaos is pouring out across the galaxy, and the Orks are certainly not picky about who they are going to fight. They will fight anyone for a good scrap. This state of the galaxy is quite literally their version of Valhalla. And all of this war and emotion has been pouring into the warp, fueling their gods Gork and Mork. So honestly, it's really not a matter of when will we see the Ork gods within the warp, but why haven't we already? And yes, it's probably because they're too busy fighting each other, I agree. But the point remains, with this amount of power fueling them, their fight will have shockwaves rippling throughout the warp. And that could have big implications on the oncoming fight between the Emperor and the Chaos Gods. Just how typical of the Orks to turn up exactly when you don't want them to. A rogue element in the great game, or a force of primal nature in the face of the ascending Emperor. Who knows how this will play out? The options are quite seriously limitless. But what of the effects on the Ork race themselves? How could this evolution of their gods affect them, if at all? If we take a look at the Imperium and the Emperor, we have seen this ascension of the Emperor play out before our very eyes within the material world. Appearances of his saints appearing more and more frequently over the years. Wherever it may be within the Imperium, on battlefields across war-torn war zones, outpourings of faith and prayer have resulted in manifestations of the Emperor's power. And the same can really be said for Chaos. The demons are walking the material world like never before, manifestations of the ruinous powers themselves. So shouldn't we expect the same kind of effects for the Orks as well? Well, it would certainly make sense. We know as the Orks gather, the psychic force of the War generates, the psychic embodiment of the Ork race. fueling the lust for war, instinctual recognition of the bigger, harder boys, and even warping reality to power their crude mechanical creations. Creations that in the hands of any other race simply refuse to work. Because the Orks believe it will work, they do work. The uniqueness of the Ork race. But could we begin to see some more literal evidence of Gork and Mork play out within this material world? Could we see some kind of Ork version of the Emperor's Saints? An empowered prime Ork perhaps? We've certainly seen these huge beasts before, simply evolving because the way the Ork race operates. So could we see one empowered by the gods? Well, that could be a devastating proposition. Any Ork war boss evolves to be bigger and harder the greater his war following generates. So if in some way he was to be blessed by Gork and Mork himself, well, that could be a devastating proposition. Or perhaps rather than affecting a being in particular, the sheer force of the war itself could in some way become a greenskin version of summoning demons. Psychic forces of greenskins pouring out like a tidal wave across the battlefield. As a war reaches its zenith, a sheer wall of violence rushing out at every enemy. Now that's definitely a little more extreme in the theory department, but definitely something that would fit in with the mould of the race. Or could we see something a little more subtle? I know subtle isn't exactly the word that springs to mind when you're talking Orks, but could we see something as simple as Gork and Mork truly interacting with their race, finally giving it a true sense of direction? Maybe even Gazkul becoming the true prophet of Gork and Mork. The biggest relief for the galaxy as a whole was always the Orks not being truly unified. So the prospect of the race finally uniting under their gods, well, that could truly bring the Orks onto the same playing field as chaos itself. What a terrifying prospect that would be. No longer the Xeno race consigned to the sidelines, always spoken of in what-if terminology. The Orks could, for the first time in their history, be on the same playing field as the Imperium and the forces of chaos themselves. Quite how that would play out, well, I'd be very interested to see. But as always guys, what do you think? Do you think we will get to see some kind of evolution of Gork and Mork? And if so, how do you think not only we will see this play out within the warp itself, but what kind of signs would this bring to the greenskins within the material world? Would we see them get some kind of greenskin version of the Emperor's Saints? Could they get some kind of embodiment of Chaos's demons? Or could we see something else entirely? Something truly unique only to the Orks themselves? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off and I'll see you all again real soon.